Moving on to the agenda, just a quick overview of the program that we have prepared for you today. We will start with a keynote on the link between WASH and food security by our guest of honor, Professor Vineras from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and then followed by a session from Working Group 5 on food security and productive sanitation. Working Group 6 will then take over with some inputs on urban water and sanitation management. Somebody's mic is on, please mute yourselves. And then after Working Group 5 and Working Group 6, we will then have a short coffee break before resuming with the session part 2, which will look at the potential of wastewater surveillance in the context of COVID-19. We will then have a short update from the SuSanA India chapter, followed by a presentation of different support tools for FSM. And then I'll go ahead and give an input on the Africa chapter. We will then take an hour break and then resume with all matters relating to the governance of our chapters and of our platform. Then we will move to the Working Group 3, which will highlight some key publication, products, and activities covering the topic of sanitation and climate. We will then have 45-minute speech launch session with a total of 9 speak previews. Then another coffee break and input from our forum moderator on the status quo and the way forward for our discussion forum. The Latin American chapter will also share with us some exciting news and updates on the Latinosan conference. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to board games with a presentation of 2 games designed to raise awareness and stimulate discussion on wash and resource recovery. We will then take our final coffee break before continuing from an input from Working Group 7 with a specific focus on WASH in school and pandemic preparedness. And then we will finally end this day with a paper to practice podcast prepared by Working Group 1 on the topic of greenhouse gases emissions from human waste. And we will then finally invite Dr. Anna Panessa, the head of the SuSanA Secretariat, to officially close this meeting, and wishing you all an excellent rest of the day. So this is an excellent way, of course, of kicking off Stockholm World Water Week as well, virtually. Again, it's a pleasure to have all of you here. We are the ones that aggregate the challenges and the hopes of people, turn it into voice, and through the SuSanA platform, turn it into knowledge. So without further ado, I would like to introduce and invite Professor Björn Vineras, who has been working on safe nutrient recycling at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences for the last 25 years, to officially open the meeting. Professor Vineras, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Are you having the presentation yet? Okay. So then you can take next slide. Okay, so I will try to introduce, you can go to the next, that's good. Talking about how we can connect sort of the link between sanitation and food production, which is quite an important part, because if we look on Earth as sort of one organism, we have a mass balance. I mean, all the elements that we have here today is the same elements that was here 1 million years ago. So we have the resources we have, and we have to deal with it. And it's important to think of how we distribute them, because the only thing that we actually are doing is that we are change the availability of them. In some cases, it's sort of the elemental availability, for example, nitrogen, where we have sort of abundance in the atmosphere, but at the same time, it's not available for the plants. And also other elements like phosphorus that is available in most forms, but what we do is sort of change the distribution from concentrated places, and we distribute it all over the world. And therefore, it is much harder to get back and get into the agriculture again. Yeah, next slide. But the view we have on sanitation, or most have sort of both of sort of food distribution and sanitation, is sort of, we have quite a good sort of picture of how we get the water to us. We get the water from a fresh water source or from groundwater. We process it and we get a very nice quality drinking water. And the same is with food, that we get it from the fields, we process it, and then we get very good food, and then we go to the toilet. Next slide. But the understanding of what actually is happening after we have been to the toilet, it's more or less like this black hole. It just disappears, and no one really are aware of what happens, and no one cares about what's happening. Next slide. And this is also the view, I would say, on food production. It's sort of, the food just appears somewhere. We know it's something with agriculture, but most people doesn't really have track of what is required to get a good food production. Next slide. But the view of food production often is sort of that we have some production industry that is producing a fertilizer that we are using in agriculture. And this fertilizer, where it comes from, it's not really anyone aware of. It's a bit discussion on that we have peak phosphorus, we have peak other elements, but really what does that mean? We have quite a good view of that it may end up, but once again, it's the only thing we actually are doing is that we are not consuming the elements, we are just redistributing them from concentrated functions. Thank you. But the actual situation, if we look upon agriculture in a global perspective, is this, where we start with a toilet. Most people has a flush toilet. The water goes somewhere, often without treatment, into a river or water recipient of some kind. And the good in this perspective with a water recipient is that, oh, here we have water constantly. In many cases, you have droughts. It's a big discussion on droughts in Europe at the moment. But the wastewater is actually making sure that we always have access to water. But if we don't have proper treatment, like in this case, it's sort of a riverbank filtration, but it doesn't really function that well. So when we use it in agriculture and actually get our produce, we have a product that is quite highly contaminated and a high risk product to eat. And when we look at much of the production that is occurring close to cities, it's sort of cash crops that you can harvest more or less on demand based on the prices you have locally, and then it becomes really dangerous, I would say, because then it's highly polluted, and these cash crops is often crops that we're consuming raw, which increases even the risk of transmitting diseases. Next slide. So hygiene is the major driver to have a linear system. I mean, when we introduced water sanitation, it was actually to get sort of one of the major reasons was to get the diseases, the excreta, out of the city center, just to make sure that we was not spreading diseases to the people living in the city. But this was like 5 to 6 billion people ago on Earth. We were considerably less people. The chance of that, both sort of the amount of excreta that we were producing, but also the risk of another person meeting that excreta was quite small. And the chemical society was not here. As today we have so many chemicals that we are producing, that we are spreading into the environment, that we don't really know what's happening with. But when we started and trying to get the excreta out of the city, then it was also affecting the food production. When we have this recycling, it was a risk of transmitting diseases. It was both transmitting diseases to the produce, but also transmitting diseases to the animal. And therefore, from the agriculture side and the food security side, we also have tried to have linear systems just to make Can you please turn off the microphone? Thank you. To make sure that we have a linear flow. So it's not contaminated by the linear sanitation flow. But unfortunately, this has not been possible in most cases because we are contaminating the surrounding. So the result is an increased risk for disease transmission because we are not really keeping track of where the stuff goes. We have a proper treatment or it's just released, and then we rely on that it's diluted and it disappears somewhere else. But by closing the loop, we can actually get concentrated fractions and controlled collection and reuse, because then we can actually deal with these diseases and we can also deal with other contaminants. Next slide. So that we have sort of a toilet where we produce the excreta, we have a treatment that produces a product that is useful for the agriculture that we get into food. Next slide. But if we want to close the loop between sanitation and food production, we have to look at the full chain. Often we are looking at sanitation only, we're looking at agriculture only. But when we do that, it's not connected. And often we see that you get products out, you have a sanitation system. I would say this discussion about sewage sludge, for example, in a lot in Europe and a lot here in Sweden, how we should deal with sewage sludge, because no one really knows what we should do with it, because farmers are not really interested, because it's not a product that is useful for the agriculture. So we have to see what can we do when we start with sanitation, looking into sanitation. We need to also look into how can we move forward and actually produce something that the farmers would like to have. But if we can do that, we can actually stop the pollution to the environment, because we're not releasing the excreta into the environment, so we can stop pathogens, we can stop micropollutants. That is sort of an emerging factor that will grow very fast and will be discussed quite a lot. We have antibiotic resistance, but we have so many other substances that we don't know what effect they have. And we find it in drinking water everywhere. And we block eutrophication. But what we also do is that we actually produce a fertilizer that we can use. And if we look at the potential of this fertilizer, is that actually that we can replace about 25% of the nitrogen that we are producing chemically today and using in agriculture. In some countries it's considerably more, in some countries is less. But on a global scale, a quarter of the mineral fertilizer that we're using can actually be replaced with local produced nutrients. Next slide. But as I mentioned, we need to look into the full chain. We have to have sanitation. We have to have collection, distribution, and treatment so that we produce something that the agriculture would like to have. So in conclusion, next slide. By closing the loop, we can actually decrease the pollution at the same time as we increase the resilience, because this is a nutrient that will be available for everyone. But the focus should be on having useful products. We should look into the resource recovery. We have to look into large-scale implementation, because these small-scale implementation just becomes one case study after another case study. We have to look much bigger, because we cannot just have one house. We have to have a full community, a full city. Otherwise, we will not move forward. But by doing this, we will actually have fertilizers available for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vinelas, for that really enlightening presentation, and love the fact that you put yourself in the center of the presentation. That is commitment. So thank you for really, yes, illuminating. Yes, you're absolutely right. Most of the time we don't ask ourselves questions after our bowel movements. So this has really been a brilliant presentation in terms of linking sanitation and achieving food security. So Professor Vinalas's presentation is the perfect prelude to the next working group on food security and productive sanitation systems. And I would like to hand over to Mr. Linus Dagaskog, who works with the Sustainable Sanitation Initiative as a research fellow and is pursuing a PhD in natural resources management at Stockholm Resilience Center, really for a closer look at the topic of food security and productive sanitation systems. Now, the session is going to be about 30 minutes, of which 25 minutes we will be hearing more on this, and you'll have 5 minutes for the Q&A. However, if we do spill over in terms of time, please put a lot of your questions in the chat box, and I will ask the presenters and moderators to go ahead and answer the questions. So without further ado, Mr. Linus Dagaskog, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Serene. Good morning, everyone. I'm Linus Dagaskog at the Stockholm Environment Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, and I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
The session is about productive sanitation and food security, and we'll give some examples and some lessons learned. And we don't have that much time, so I'll just give an outline and then dive into it. So I will start. I will do an interactive poll on reuse to know your opinions, and then give you a very brief overview of a new rural productive sanitation framework we call Clean and Green Village, developed by SEI and WaterAid in Burkina Faso. That will be followed by a presentation from Malawi by Dr. Russell Shidja on Ecosan in Lilongwe. And finally, our reflections from Paige Drexel from the IMI headquarters in Sri Lanka, reflecting on many years of resource recovery and reuse experiences in Asia and Africa. So I would like to start with an interactive poll. And to get to this poll, you need to either use your phone and the QR code you see on the screen, or click on the link that I think someone has posted in the chat, or just enter the website for the questions in your browser. So I hope that you managed to do this, and I'll see if we can kickstart the questions. So it's you just enter the etc.ch/W R8U, and then we will go to the first question, which is, how important is it for you that we close the loop between sanitation and agriculture? How important is it for you that we close the loop between sanitation and agriculture? We have 37 participants. I think you see the results on your screen. And 42 votes all think it's very important. That's great. So we'll go to the next question, which is, how about your feelings on eating food fertilized with safe sanitation products, i.e., when you will be served food that have been fertilized with either sanitized urine, fecal compost, treated wastewater, what will be your reaction? Is it yuck, no thanks? Is it, are you neutral, or would you say great, more please?
Maybe you will have to refresh, because at least I have submitted my answer.
Yeah, it seems like, yeah, now it's coming. It's a bit of a delay since it's embedded in the presentation. So we have a surprising amount of positive consumers here. More than 50% think it's great or neutral, and only a minority would say yuck, no thanks. So I think we have We are not very representative from the world population, I guess, but we are all aficionados and aware of the importance. The next question that I would like to know is which field is your main expertise? I see it's lagging on the screen, but I can see the results coming in, and we are almost 70% wash people, 20% environment, and roughly 4% from agriculture. So if we want to close the loop, we need to balance up the wash and agriculture expertise in our sector and collaborate much more with agriculture. The next question is, do you have a personal experience from reusing urine and/or feces in your garden? Either urine only, feces only, both, or none? And the results are coming in, and we do have quite a significant proportion of people who have used urine. Very few only feces. Some 6% have used both, but the majority still has no personal experience. So I think we have some homework to do, right? And the last question will be, what is, according to you, the greatest barrier to more reuse? Would you say it's attitudes, health risks, lack of legal frameworks, technologies, or economic incentives? And this was quite interesting. I think we have almost a tie between attitudes, legal frameworks, health risks, and lack of economic incentives. This could be it's a nice picture of the challenges we're facing, right? There's a lot of things that we need to work on. So I'll leave the poll. Thank you everyone for participating. And I will now head into just a short overview of what I think about reuse potential in rural and urban contexts. If we look at rural areas, we have 500 million smallholder farms who support 2 billion people with livelihoods and food. And it's a fact that each person produces the equivalent of 10 to 15 kilos of chemical fertilizers in their excreta every year. And with that, you can produce about 100 kilos of grain per year. So recycling of this, your own man-made natural fertilizer would make a big difference in rural areas, and especially for smallholder farmers. You can look at urban areas as man-made nutrient mines, but we'll need technologies, business models, policies, legal framework, and acceptance by farmers and consumers for this to actually become reality. And all of this will require capacity, cross-sector collaboration, and of course, a paradigm shift in our minds, technical systems, and institutions. And I'd like to head into rural productive sanitation, which is where my passion lies, where I've been working for 10, 15 years. And I think we're moving towards looking at rural sanitation as integrated risk and resource management. Usually we have a situation, often with open defecation. We work a lot on access to toilets. We know that it's not the access, but it's actually the use of toilets and managing the fecal sludge that protects health. And if we also want productive benefits, then we need safe reuse. The main approaches today in rural sanitation, CLTS, is great at mobilizing the community, getting people to build a toilet, use a toilet. They're starting to look at fecal sludge management, but there's very little emphasis on safe reuse. On the other hand, we also have quite a few pilots on ecological sanitation that really focus on treatment and reuse of human excreta, but have difficulty scaling up, difficulties reaching all people. So it's actually the combination that would be necessary, the system view from EcoSan plus the mobilization approach from CLTS. But in addition, if we really want to protect health, we have to look what other hazards are there in the local environment to manage. And more we recognize that animal excreta is a big factor, solid waste, grey water needs to be taken care of. Manage water points, hygiene measures like food and water hygiene and hand washing will be important. Human excreta is only one piece of the local resource puzzle. We also have animal excreta, grey water, organic waste, and ash taken care of. But there is a lack of frameworks to work with this in practice. So at SEI, we are developing a new framework we call Clean Green Village, where communities start at a poor risk and resource management level, and often in many countries, CLTS is a national policy approach to achieve open defecation-free villages. And often it ends there, but we think that to take the relay from such an achievement of ODF and pursue the management of more health threats, both on household and public areas, as well as the productive recycling of the key waste resource flows on household and public areas would be the next step. And you can imagine different types of recognitions, rewards, or certifications on both household and public level to achieve a clean and green village. And in order to operationalize this, theoretical framework, we're working with WaterAid and OVIV in Burkina Faso as a small component in a big rural sanitation program they're doing there. And we have started with developing different tools for awareness raising, as well as practical experiences of both different toilet types and farmer field schools on reuse and recycling. And this is complemented with a monitoring framework to evaluate if clean components are achieved and if the green components are achieved. And we would really like to pilot and work on this in other settings and contexts as well. So you're happy to be in contact with you who are interested in this afterwards. And I also think that we really need to practice what we preach. And here are a few photos from a small farm that I co-own with friends on urine collection, our dry toilet, some fecal compost, and our garden. So please contact me if you want to discuss more on the Clean and Green framework. With that, I'd like to hand over to Russell Shidya from Malawi. Are you with us, Russell?
Yes, I'm available. I was trying to connect on my PC. I was using the phone, but I'm available.
Hey, do you see the screen as well?
Yes, I can see the screen.
Okay, so the floor is yours. I'll change slide when you tell me.
Okay. All right. I think for now I'll proceed using the phone. Hello, everyone. As the Secretariat has indicated, so my name is Russell Shidya, based here at Nzuzu University, specifically in the Department of Water and Sanitation under the Faculty of Environmental Sciences. As indicated, we would like to share some of the lessons based on the project that is being implemented in Lilongwe. So we'll be looking at empowering rural communities through ecological and sustainable wash practices in Lilongwe, Malawi. Yeah, next. Yeah, so as it has been indicated in the background, trying to connect the importance of, the link between sanitation and nutrients recovery On the other hand, we also appreciate the significance of sanitation, where it's highlighted in the Sustainable Development Goal number 6. And also, this is also in line with the country's framework that guides the wash sector. And a very good example is that of national water policy as well as the national sanitation policy, which also advocates for promotion of the wash services in the country at all levels. Just as a background, so out of the 18 million people in Malawi, about 33% of them, they do not have access to improved sanitation. Next. Yeah, so when we look at the linkage between sanitation and the recovery of the nutrients from the same as it has been indicated, we realize that the low-cost ecological sanitation programs will actually also improve on the food production, apart from improving the sanitation. And so improved agricultural production using the eco-san toilets, driven composites can actually support both the masons that may be engaged in constructing these toilets, and at the same time supporting the households, whereby they can manage to harvest and of course recover the nutrients from the same. However, scaling up sustainable and such ecological toilets seem to be a complex process, where of course here in Africa, especially in Malawi, you look at some other issues that also come into play. You're looking at the social norms, the taboos, and of course the poverty levels, and at the same time, lack of expertise as well as the technical aspects. Next. Yeah, so in this presentation, we'll be focusing much on the technical aspect, which SuSanA University, together with the Habitat for Humanity, contributed to ensure that now the locals, via the masons, they should be able to adopt these eco-san technologies, so that in the process they should be able to improve within the sanitation sector, and at the same time also be able to recover the nutrients from the same. So the Habitat for Humanity Malawi and its partner Habitat for Humanity Germany is implementing a project in Lilongwe, which is aiming at empowering rural communities so that they achieve better health and as well as a quality of life through the sustainable wash practices. So specifically, the project is aimed at designing and implementing eco-san technologies that are suitable for the rural areas, and again also to promote the ecological and sustainable wash practices, and finally also to implement the capacity development as well as the wash advocacy and the marketing activities. So SuSanA University came in to provide the technical support in terms of training the masons, and at the same time helping to transfer such technologies, so that in the process the locals, they can actually utilize those technologies. So in this presentation, we just kind of like doing a review, trying to evaluate the implementation of such a WASH project and see what sort of lessons we get out of that. Next. Yeah, so as I said, the project is being implemented in Tie Masumba Nkunda, which is in Lilongwe. That's the capital city of Malawi. It's the rural setup, not in the urban, but it's the rural setup where this project is being implemented. So like I said, in this presentation, we just kind of like reviewing and evaluating what has been done so far. A lot, of course, is to be done, but we just wanted to share some lessons out of what has been done. So we kind of like collected the data through the document review and, of course, the literature search. Next. Yeah, so from the outcome of the project implementation, so far, as I mentioned, we in SuSanA University managed to train 10 masons. So the idea was that instead of just going to the communities and then start teaching the communities, helping them understand the eco-san toilets and the cupboard, we devised the system that we should train the masons, so that these masons now they should go into the rural areas now building those eco-san toilets. Of course, they'll build for a household, and then after building, then they'll be paid by that household. So we managed to train 10 masons, as I said. So these were the ones now who are now going around in the communities, trying to build and at the same time sensitize and then teach the locals. Okay, next, please. Yeah, so that's just the process which we followed. I have to mention to say that apart from just empowering the Masons with the knowledge, but it is also important that we were supposed to teach them the theory. So we had to teach them the theory so that for them they should understand the technical issues, the risks that are involved, some of the standards that are supposed to be followed. And then in the process, now they'll finally start marketing the sanitation and the technologies. I have to mention to say that we just started with the cobalt latrine, which of course is suitable in those areas because the soils are loose. But now the next steps will be now for these Masons to start building the EcoSan toilets, where now the communities will be able to harvest the nutrients out of the same. So this is just an outline of the content that learned, and then the picture you see there is just some of the participants during the lessons. Next. Yeah, and then these are just some of the pictures of the activities that were done when we were trying to construct the cobalt latrine. I have to mention to say that this cobalt latrine is not intended for harvesting the fecal sludge or the urine, but rather this technology just helps to suit the particular environments because the soils are loose, and therefore you want to come up with a substructure which is lined, and then in the process the latrines may take long. So as I said, this is just the first initiative where we're trying to transfer the technologies, but the subsequent efforts will be now to construct the EcoSan toilets. As part of the learning points, so we realized that teaching the Masons the theory was really key and important, and of course monitoring of the project was also important. And again, we noted that motivation of those Masons to really be motivated. We noted that they were supposed to be provided with the startup. And then so there are some of the startups when they were also constructing the demonstration. And then in terms of the lessons and challenge in upscaling the sanitation technologies in areas, from this project, we realized that some households were unwilling to pay for the sanitation services, because for them, they feel like they don't have to really pay so much to get such kind of technologies. Loose soils, we also noted that they were able to, the cobalt latrine as well as the EcoSan toilets, they were able to withstand that. In some other areas, we had high water table. That really brought some challenges in terms of the implementation of the projects. And again, we also noted that the Masons, which were trained after they went now to start constructing the toilets, they were charging high costs, and that also brought some challenges. In some other Masons, they were failing to follow the standards during construction. And again, of course, high prices in terms of the raw materials, which also brought a kind of like a challenge. And then we noted also something which was very interesting, that there was low female participation. So this is another area where now we really need to improve as regards to the female participation. Next. Yeah, so as the next course of action for the project, as I said, so will be to construct and promote the EcoSan toilets for the urine as well as the fecal sludge harvesting. So we believe that the next phase of the project will be a success. I didn't mention this, but as SuSanA University, we do optimize and study several EcoSan toilets and technologies, and to really check whether they suit our environment. So we believe we are going to transfer such technologies to our colleagues, the Habitat for Humanity, and then transfer the Masons so that they can take it up. Next slide, please. Yeah, so thanks so much. We acknowledge the SuSanA University Center of Excellence in Water and Sanitation and the Habitat for Humanity, as well as the Sanitation and Water for All for the support and the technical guidance. And thanks everybody for listening. I hope I was audible enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Russell. I will now hand over the floor to Dr. Pei Drexel from IMI headquarters. Pei, I think you're with us, and I think you will share your screen.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Linus. I'm with you. During the last presentation, I was twice kicked out, but then after some time I came back. So in case there's an interruption, please show some patience. Let me see if I get the screen up.
Perfect.
You see it?
Great, we see it.
And you see it in presentation mode?
Yep.
Okay, because I don't see it. I see it still in a different mode. Don't want to make a mistake. Let me go here in presentation. Is it moving if I press this?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, because I don't see it in this way. So thanks a lot for the invitation. It was quite interesting to hear the previous presentation. Also because it reflected a bit on the poll you just did. Yeah, this old bias between all those in the SuSanA group who are actually coming from the wash sector and the few who come from the agricultural side. So it's the
I think we've lost him.
Yeah. Sorry, Pei. Sri Lanka broadband seemed to be narrow. Can you hear us?
Am I still
No, now we hear you. Now we hear you.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So IMI is working since, and the slide has changed?
Yeah, we're on the circular
There's a
bioeconomy.
circle? Yeah, sorry. So IMI has worked over the last 20 years on what's now called the circular bioeconomy, and we use still terms like resource recovery and reuse. And as a Agricultural Research Institute, we are coming more from the reuse and approaching this. And in this presentation, I have in principle 3 sections. One is a preamble, and then I want briefly to present 3 examples from our work and speak about a new CGIAR initiative. So the preamble, that goes actually back 2014, also Stockholm World Water Week, where there was a very interesting session which was on failures. It's very seldom that we speak about failures. And I had a presentation on guinea pigs and white elephants. So white elephants, I assume everyone knows, that are these infrastructure projects which were set up and then fail and don't fit actually because something went wrong. And I went because I brought examples from Ghana where it was based for more than 10 years and presented there one of my favorite compost stations, which was running only for a few years, but kept alive mostly for show purposes. And over time became part of a big landfill site because the city never stopped bringing the waste to the compost station. Also, the compost station did not produce anything. So, and such white elephants we saw also when it came to wastewater treatment plants, when it came to fecal sludge treatment plants, if decentralized or centralized, so many broken down, whatever the size and whatever the year it was established. Still pity that I don't see where I am. Try it this way. Which slide do you see at the moment? Is there a slide
with the big elephant in the middle?
With a big elephant in the middle. Okay, that's fantastic. So, and at the end of this presentation in Stockholm, I reflected how much are we researchers actually in a position to do better. And with researchers, I meant mostly those in the CGIAR, which is a global partnership of coming from the research sector on food security, and where IMI is one of those centers, and we are working a lot on this, the interface between agriculture and sanitation. And as many of you, also we in the CG, over the last years adopted series of change, scaling frameworks, and as hard as we try, they still look, of course, very academic and not really driven by practical experience. And as researchers, we are we are challenged by that. Most people see us very good in writing journal articles, and that's certainly true. But then how much do we really understand impact? How much can we go out? And one of the big challenges that we as research institutions normally hire researchers, scientists. We do not hire entrepreneurs. This is changing now, but only very, very slowly. and should actually get a boost if the donor really wants that we achieve impact. Now, with this preamble, I would like to come to some examples of our work, and I chose those carefully. I didn't choose those where we shine, which are our best success stories. No, I think it's not enough if we only show success stories. We do not learn enough. We also have to show the things where we are struggling. And I think that is equally very important. And so my first example comes from our work on municipal solid waste and fecal-sludge co-composting, which started with big help from Sandek. And we continued then, we worked on pelletizing, etc., this in Asia and in Africa. And out of this came many, many publications. These publications started with technical aspects, and then we went on to market research, to farm and soil applications for different crops, the regulatory framework, finance options, business models, etc., etc. And the example I wanted to bring here is from Ghana, where we went for the full Monty. We went for implementation. So we went the next steps. And so far in Ghana, we established 4 public-private partnerships, a co-composting plant in Akratema, another one in Somalia, where also there's a briquette production component, a wastewater aquaculture plant we supported already since long time from this enterprise works was there and then others. And a new one now just coming, a co-composting plant in Ho. And reflecting on these, on the challenges and success of these different plants, I apologize, a slide with now more words, but one of these compost plants, especially the first one we had, there was a competing company which claimed the land of our first plant 2 years after its inauguration as a public-private partnership. They fenced it, they blocked the supply septage and municipal solid waste, and currently the plant is only operating at the minimum capacity, and there's no solution in sight. So this certainly is not what we expected. That's a failure. We created another white elephant, something I was always afraid of, something after this presentation in Stockholm, of course, I never wanted to happen. And now, of course, we have to reflect, what did we miss? What did we not see? I might give as a background information that land conflicts constitute about 60% of all court cases in Ghana. So that's very, very common. And moreover, we are in the vicinity of Accra. Accra is changing, Accra is growing. Municipalities within Accra are new defined, assemblies are new defined, their boundaries are new defined. So also, even from the public side, the ownership is changing. So it's a very dynamic environment, and we are trying to extract the lessons from this. But of course, it's not something where we are proud of. It's something where we can only learn. The second point here is for another compost plant we are working on. It was always our idea to step out of it. As a research institution, yes, we can offer some accompanying research, but we wanted to step out after the public-private partnership was set up. But then it didn't break even, and further investments were needed, and production optimization, a lot of technical aspects to reach economies of scale. We had to rethink the marketing strategies. We had to look again into innovative, sustainable finance and business thinking. Should the whole be at the end a branch of the private sector or a subsidiary? What could better make it sustainable? And all this undermined our exit strategy, and it undermined the impact pathway which we had in mind and which was outlined. While on the other side, of course, all this offers a lot of lessons learned, but try to find publications about things which go wrong and the lessons learned. You only find publications about success stories. On the other side, this wastewater aquaculture partnership was diversifying, went into greenhouses, biogas, is thriving despite setbacks under COVID. It won several awards, and is really a very nice study. And there are links where you can learn more about it. And also the briquette production found a very, very strong market and shows a clear ability to drive the business to profitability, could also eventually support the compost part of the plants. So very mixed bag of successes and things we have to reflect upon and make an analysis. The second example is about.
Pei, you got a red time card from the SuSanA Secretariat, just for your information.
Yep, I'm hurrying up. The second example is on the refugee settlements in East Africa, very interesting project where we are engaging a lot in capacity building for resource recovery. These are 6 refugee camps in 3 countries, and we are investing in capacity building in home gardening, grey water use, waste composting, and especially dry fuel production from organic waste, because there's a lot of competition and conflicts around firewood between the camps and the host communities. And so while we made a progress, there came then COVID-19, and COVID-19 is especially disastrous for the refugee camps, because what is the community where you don't want to have epidemics, where you have a high density, where you have poor wash facilities that are refugee camps? And then for alternative strategies, where can't you go? Where are households not having PCs and you can't reach them virtually? Again, refugee camps. So here we are lagging behind. We are in a no-cost extension, but I'm not sure we can reach the numbers of trainees we had in mind. The last example is about slum resettlements in New Delhi, where our objective was to install a fecal sludge treatment plant with some resource recovery and reuse components. And there we had again a land issue. So while everything went fine and we had a great everything planned, the Delhi Urban Shelter Improvement Board, certainly for very good reasons, at the end eventually dropped the idea of putting there the fecal sludge treatment plant and favored a different land use. So the fecal sludge management remained unsustainable, and we couldn't deliver to the donor what we had promised. And that's certainly bad. And again, the questions, could we have foreseen this? Could there have been a plan B? So certainly one of our next publications will be on lessons learned. And this brings me just to one slide. That's the last slide of the new CG initiative. There are actually 33 new initiatives by these CG partnership. And the one maybe most interesting for this group is the Resilient Cities through Sustainable Urban Peri-urban Food Systems. It has many work packages, and there's one where I'm leading it, which is on the circular bioeconomy, where we invite partners, where we welcome ideas to do research, to work on lessons learned, to do global reviews, missing guidelines, where we love to host students or have visiting scientists or better practitioners coming to us. And please also look at the IMI website about the vacancies, because these initiatives have money and we like to hire more people, and we don't want to create white elephants. That's the message. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much, Pei and Linus, as well as Chidia, for those excellent presentations. Linus, you're right. Yes, practice what you preach. So this is really good that you're actually speaking from a point of doing. Russell, totally, yes, appreciate the fact that women are not involved enough, and has met a number of the challenges that you've encountered. And Pei, yes, what a candid presentation in terms of, again, the challenges. And I think this was really the spirit of the SuSanA platform in terms of sharing some of our challenges, not only as successes and where we can learn. I've just seen one comment. We will probably have to forego the Q&A, but please, Pei, Linus, and Chidia, do go ahead and answer the questions within the chat box, where someone has said that why is Pei getting such little time? So I really think this is the point of engaging in the discussion forums and the SuSanA platform, in terms of really unpacking and hearing what our various presenters have to say, but also in terms of the knowledge. So we are running about 15 minutes late, but we'll try and level that out with the lunch break. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Working Group 6 on cities. And I would like to invite Dorothy Spuler and Abhishek Sankara Narayan from EAWAG. Dorothy and Abhishek, over to you. You have 30 minutes.
Thank you very much for this. And I think it's a very nice transition into the cities part from what we had earlier. We spoke a lot about white elephants. We spoke about how we need to think beyond just sanitation and how it interacts with other sectors. And I think that's where we will first begin. So my name is Abhishek. I'm a postdoc at Sandek at EAWAG, and if it's okay, can I share my own screen just to control the slides?
Yeah, sure, Alexander, that's possible.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
please go ahead.
Great. Yeah.
So, okay, perfect. So, I mean, today I just want to quickly run through why integration is a good idea and why we're trying to do this in small towns in Uganda. I mean, at a very high level, why integrate? I mean, we've seen that a lot of attempts in the past when we think only about sanitation has often failed because we forgot to think about, or we conveniently neglected solid waste management or stormwater systems or roads and many other sectors which directly interact with sanitation. And why we're doing this in small towns is because if you take Africa as a continent, there's about 6,500 small towns. And this is the single largest growing urban segment in the world. So it is very important that we start thinking about this urban continuum, urban rural continuum, right from mega cities to villages. And small towns is a very important segment, which is often neglected. So that's where this new project of ours at EAWAG Sandek comes in, where we are thinking about, of course, water supply, sanitation, and solid waste, but also trying to integrate this in a way that makes sense and trying to develop capacities and disseminate these products to both the local community, but also to the global development sector. Now, to go into actual details of why integration, especially when we look at water supply, sanitation, and solid waste, is interesting. If you just look at this picture on your, this diagram on your right, you might see that these three sectors are actually quite similar to each other. They all start with some sort of source, move through containment, emptying, transport, and disposal. And for water, it's the exact opposite, right? And if these are not managed together, if we're not taking a holistic approach, there is a lot of negative synergies that is happening, a lot of negative interactions between each of these different steps in each of these service chains. For example, a classic example is if you walk through a town and there's a stormwater that's going next to you, you might see that there's water in it. There's contamination from pit latrines or septic tanks or even sewer systems entering the stormwater drains. And there's likely to be quite a bit of solid waste in it. So this is a very classic example of where these three sectors closely interact. Now, if we are to more holistically manage this, we could not only avoid the negative interactions, but also try and leverage positive synergies from this. For example, what we just heard earlier about co-digestion of organic waste and fecal waste. And there could be reuse of wastewater, of course, at a household level, but possibly in urban horticulture and other places as well. So all of this kind of gives you possibilities for synergies, but it is not easy to implement them. And that is where we thought that there's a whole bunch of different aspects of an enabling environment which is required in order to see this to reality. All of what I just said is nice to hear, and it's fairly theoretical or looking at secondary data and literature. But when we actually look for examples, there's not too many examples which have systematically documented this around. So therefore, we wanted to test this out, and we come with the hypothesis that planning these three sectors together will give better planning outcomes, but also service outcomes. Which means the first question that we want to answer is, how do you integrate? we don't know for sure. And that's, I mean, there's definitely a lot of thought that's gone behind this in the past. But today in small towns, how do we do this? There's no systematic planning guideline that we know of. Similarly, if at all we are successful in this, what would be the overall gains in terms of service and in terms of process? And that's the two main questions that we are answering in the next 4 years in two small towns north of Kampala in Uganda. One is Kakoge and the other is Wobulensi. And maybe for those who are not familiar with Uganda, it's they have a 3-tiered system of governance. There's, of course, the national level, then there's the district level, and then district level is subdivided into either counties or municipalities, and these are then subdivided into parishes. As of 2022, there is going to be a new parish model where the decentralization is happening at the lowest level and funding is being provided directly to the parish level. That makes things both interesting, but also there's challenges in terms of institutional setup and so on. And so it's a very interesting time to be in these small towns in Uganda. Now, we went there for a scoping visit recently, and we made some overarching learnings. So if you look at water supply, in these two small towns, which I think are quite representative, is, of course, there's poor planning. Therefore, there's intermittent supply. The demand is not being met. We've not done water quality assessments yet, but when we spoke to some of the stakeholders, they said, yes, there are incidences of diarrhea here, now and then, but so there's, of course, issues with water supply. And then when you come into sanitation, there's this picture on your left, you see is a communal toilet, which was built, which was opened with a lot of fanfare, but and it's charged about half $1 for using it, or even lesser. And you see the state it is in, right? They planned the toilet. They had someone given the mandate of managing it, but the water supply was not adequately planned, and the toilet therefore became defunct. And to your next is just about 2-3 kilometers from where this toilet is. You see where a lot of the waste is being discharged. A lot of the sludge is often being discharged in this part, and so on. And when you finally come to solid waste management, there is a defunct collection system. What you see here is the truck which was meant to collect solid waste, which is no more operational. And there is an open landfill, which is basically just a dumping site. And that's also not more than 500 meters away from a nearby school. The collection was meant to be done once a week by a private company, but obviously the private-public model failed because the financial system wasn't adequately planned. And to continue from what Pei said, is there is a white elephant in one of these small towns, which is Kakuge as well. This is a fecal sludge treatment plant which was built for 1 billion Ugandan shillings. And as you can see from the picture, since 2019, there's not been a single drop of fecal sludge that has entered this treatment plant. So it is to say that white elephants are all across these small towns and cities, and there needs to be something done about this. And the reason why this white elephant exists is because the fecal sludge treatment plant, when we went around and saw, I think it's quite well built, but there is no fecal sludge coming because nobody has lined pits in that small town. And if you are to build a line pit, chances are the cost is more than the house itself. So people are not willing to invest in that. And we also want to recognize that when we spoke to stakeholders, there's many things that we have to remember, right? Integration is a good idea, but over integration may not be such a good idea, because then there's just too much to handle. And one more thing which we felt very positive about is these kinds of research are transdisciplinary, which means we want to work as closely as possible with the local community, with the local government, and so on. And they also recognize the advantage of doing such research, because research can then be translated into investments, into better implementation and so on. And finally, just a call for sort of help and support from the larger SuSanA community is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we want to look at past attempts on integration and learn from it. I've been talking to a few people who have been supporting us with this, but if you have learnings from past attempts that you know of, that you were involved in or you've heard of, please do share your knowledge. There is already a forum post on this at the SuSanA website. Otherwise, if you just want to bilaterally give us some information, please feel free to email me. Thank you. And I think if there are no questions at this point, I'll directly go to hand over the mic to Dorothy, and then at the end we can take some questions if that's okay.
Over to you, Dorothy.
Sorry, I just
No worries.
need to share my screen as well. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can, though it's showing a number
Everything.
of windows. Yes,
Perfect.
Here we go. Great.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I hope I can make it short. I'm Dorothy Sproler. I'm actually also a postdoc together with Abhishek at EAWAG Sandvik, and I'm presenting now an initiative called the Urban Water Flow Diagram, which is comes out of an idea of the Swiss Community of Practice for Water and Sanitation, and a number of partners where you see the logos here, with some core partners, which is EAWAG, SDC, and the Swiss Water Partnership. So just Abhishek, yeah. The presentation is called Urban Water Flow Diagram, Visual Stories for Better Water Resource Management. And this initiative obviously was kind of inspired by similar initiatives like the shit flow diagram or the waste flow diagram, which were quite successful and still are important in this sector. So the motivation behind actually was that at the meeting of Aguasan, in 2019, it was in this community of practice. There are a number of different actors, from civil society to public actors, NGOs, but from water, sanitation, hygiene, and all different topics. And together we kind of often talk about this need for sustainable urban water management, that we need this integrated and inclusive approach, linking different sectors like Abhishek just illustrated, but also the different stakeholders from all these sectors. That makes it quite complicated. And in many projects of this partners we have in this community of practice, one question is where to start. So what we thought is that this flow approach or visual approach could be a very good tool that actually allows to start the process. So the idea was that from an understanding of kind of having a conceptual model, having a visualization of water flows and everything that's happening, that would allow then to kind of find solutions. Just realized I have to share another presentation. And then, no, it was the right one, sorry. So what happened so far, we started in 2020 and decided that was kind of a good idea. We formed an alliance together with other partners, including Stockholm Environmental Institute, UNICEF, and we developed 3 case studies, which should kind of be a prototype for a methodology. That was in 2021, and we presented that in Stockholm World Water Week. And for that, our theory of change for these case studies was somehow we want to visualize urban water flows, the quantities, qualities, balances, and problematic issues, but also the opportunities. This should kind of enable a dialogue among different water users, so industries, communities, and governing bodies. It should increase political priority, and we wanted to foster collaboration between IWRM, WASH, Human Rights, Water and Sanitation, and also the circular economy actors in a town, and eventually trigger more holistic and thus sustainable kind of management decisions in the future. One case study we had at that time was in Rio Pardo de Minas, in Brazil, not Brazil, and it was led by an NGO, a Swiss NGO, which has a very strong office in this area. And it was based in a multi-actor network that already worked kind of the topic. And we started to kind of develop this visual together with the local stakeholders, having data collection and then put that into a SuSanA diagram. I skipped the video. The diagram at the end looked like this. So I'm gonna explain that a little bit better in a few slides later. But you basically have the water source, the treatment or no treatment, the different uses in green, then either wastewater treatment or directly reach to the environment, and then what happens kind of the sink of the whole water flow diagram. So what did the people see in this diagram in the case study in Brazil? They kind of realized that the main water-related problems was the low rate of sewage collection treatment and large losses of water that actually was treated but was lost on the way to its user, and of course a high lack of data related to the surface water quality. And also what they realized that an important fraction of the water is actually used for car washing. So that's opened up a lot of questions for the local actors. I don't want to enter into detail there, but this triggered the whole process, which is still going on in this city. And we had the feedback from the different actors that the tool for them was kind of easy to apply. Having this visual, having everyone on the same table look at the picture, allowed to have an objective and intuitive understanding, and based on that kind of a dialogue on the same level of understanding of these different actors. And it triggered also to have the industry and the governing bodies and the civil society communities to come together and start now to find solutions. We also we did the same case study also for Bern. Here you have a water flow diagram of the city of Bern. And what we identified there was for Switzerland, quite a high rate of combined sewer overflows, over 7%. In Bern now, actually, there is increased interest in starting to kind of recover this lost rainwater and relieve the sewer networks by including nature-based solution or kind of more sponge cities approaches. We also had at that time a case study we presented from Bangalore together with the Stockholm Environmental Institute, which was based on a block flow diagram. After this kind of Stockholm session in 2021, we kind of summarized all the inputs and feedback we got from stakeholders, and one key question was how to overcome the data gap. And we realized that we need some sort of standardization of this methodology. So together with a colleague from EAWAG, Lucas, and also Marc-André Bünzli from SDC, we started to think about this standardized methodology that should enable practitioners to use the tool, the urban water flow diagram, ensure the comparability of different water flow diagram over time and regions, clarity about what it shows and what it doesn't show, and an alignment of the wordings between different sectors or approaches from WASH, IWM, Human Right to Water and Sanitation, and the SDGs. So kind of we had the intention that in this flow diagram, actually by a very different way and intuitive way, we can somehow link visually to a whole bunch of SDG 6 indicators illustrated here in this slide. So we started to work on this methodology. Now we are one year we've been working on it, and we have developed a draft which contains 6 main components: system map and a notes library, kind of that people can choose what are their type of sources, type of water treatment, type of uses, and type of reuses, type of wastewater treatments, and so on, and different ways then how to create different flow diagrams with different colors. So one example here, you see kind of the system map and the system boundaries, how we defined it now, the urban water flow diagram. It has 6 functional groups, being source, drinking water treatment, use, wastewater treatment, discharge, and reuse. And the recharge is considered in a second step because it becomes very difficult, because you interact actually outside your boundaries, especially when you think about the groundwater, which in other approaches is often forgotten in urban water management. So that's an example illustrating the nodes library. For each of these nodes, actually, we have a detailed definition what it is. So this should allow people to understand and tag their infrastructure that they actually see in their city. And the first step is then to make a water quantity diagram using this Sankey diagram approach, here showing an example again from Brazil. The second element is then with a table we provide, to define in colors the quality of the water. So we have 4 qualities: uncontaminated, biologically contaminated, chemically contaminated, and unknown. And for each of the different flows, we give a definition when something is which category. We also have then a methodology for judgment to come to this somehow more easy red-green message. So this is defined by a judgment based on a water quality inflow and its use. So is the water quality of a specific flow appropriate or problematic? One example, which you see here in number 1, would be appropriate. It's the consumption of treated water. But another example would be 2, problematic. That would be the discharge of untreated wastewater to river. So this methodology is now so just to illustrate one example of a link to SDG, so you could actually also include in the diagram some judgment related to SDG indicators, here giving the example for drinking water services. So what we have now today is a step-by-step guide. We have these nodes and flow library and the data collection sheet that allows you to kind of collect or enter your judgments or the data you find in your town. We connect that to a SuSanA Meeting, which is an open source online SuSanA diagram generator. And we also provide some visual templates to afterwards making the diagram really intuitive for different actors in different contexts. So that's what we have, and we test that now in a second phase. We start with a case study in Senegal. We also do another one in Brazil. We're thinking about Peru, Honduras, and we are very open to feedback and having other people kind of joining us in this initiative. You can either contact me or my colleague. I think you will find my email somewhere on the SuSanA homepage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothee and Abhishek, for those excellent presentations, really addressing what seem to be like very complex issues, but putting it at the center of the story and giving us the heart of the story. So we really appreciate that. There are a number of questions that are coming up in the toolbox, so please do go ahead and answer those. A lot who are saying, I know Sean was saying that he wished he had the tool a lot earlier, and a number of questions as well on the diagram and its parameters. So I'll leave you to that. All right, look, let's go for a coffee break. I know we had promised you 15 minutes, but we're probably going to have to do 10, and we will ask you what you did. So please let us see you back here in about 10 minutes, and as we continue on to another session of cities part 2. See you then in a bit. Thank you. All right, we have just about a minute, calling everyone in. I can see that most of you had a glass of water. And more than half of us, yes, I remember in the morning, said that they needed to be caffeinated. And I can see, yes, cup of tea and cup of coffee. The figures keep varying between the tea drinkers and the coffee drinkers. And 14% of none of the above. Be curious to know what you did. All right. All right. Paresh said he's just finished lunch. Excellent. So you'll be having a longer coffee break then later on. All right, Alexandra, we can move to the slide. The next, we're opening the floor. Is everyone back? And I can see Dorothée is swamped with questions. Even let out a oof. All right. Okay. If we can, yeah, please take, if we could please take down the coffee and tea break slide.
Yeah, it's already the next slide.
All right, thanks. Thanks. Maybe I'm not seeing it on my side. All right, so part 2, again, on cities. And we're going to really be looking at an interesting topical issue, which is wastewater surveillance. And I would like to invite Nathalie Schmidt from GIZ to moderate the following session. Nathalie, you have 45 minutes and over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I just had a cup of coffee, so thankfully I'm prepared. Let me just jump right in, as we are, as always, heavily restricted on time. I would hand over to the first opening presentation, which is featuring a sort of wider global focus on the topic of wastewater surveillance for COVID-19 and other pathogens in wastewater. And Kate Medlicott is giving us kind of an overview of the activities done by WHO. Kate Medlicott is the sanitation and wastewater waste team leader within the WASH team at the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. And in this role, she is responsible for translating evidence to policy and practice through WHO guidelines on sanitation and health, safe use of wastewater and recreational water quality, and associated tools such as sanitation, safety planning, and sanitary inspections. And she also leads health sector collaborations where sanitation is a critical component of risk and disease control, such as antimicrobial resistance, neglected tropical diseases, and environmental surveillance on COVID-19. So without further delay, over to you, Kate.
Thank you all. And I'm going to give a quick kind of overview here. Please forgive me for a rather hurriedly put together presentation.
Kate, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but you're a bit faint.
I'm going to have to speak loudly. I seem to have this
ongoing
issue. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay,
but
I'll try to get close to the speaker. So just to say that the more details of what I'm going to speak about is in this link here to a recent publication we prepared on environmental surveillance for COVID-19. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted first to just put this into a bit of context. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we had to spend quite a lot of time firstly clarifying and making sure that it was well understood. Firstly, that COVID is not transmitted by wastewater, so the purpose of surveillance is not to look for transmission, but for patterns of disease outbreaks. And also we needed to spend a lot of time making sure that basic WASH access as a fundamental service, essential service, and pandemic preparedness and response was at the forefront of the response approach. It's also good to remember that although, environmental surveillance has really kind of come to prominence during the COVID pandemic, it's not a new tool. It's been used very successfully for many years, especially on polio, but also for typhoid, illicit drugs, and to a certain extent on antimicrobial resistance. We also need to be really clear that environmental surveillance is not intended as an alternative to clinical surveillance, but rather a complementary tool that can assist in supporting decision making. It's particularly useful because it provides this population level data, so not just what's presenting at health facilities, but a better view of what's happening in the total population. Yep, so as we've seen, this has been scaled up in a really wide number of countries over the last 2 to 3 years, and that gave us kind of sufficient learning and knowledge to prepare global guidance on the topic. But we can kind of think of the way environmental surveillance works, not just for COVID, but for all disease targets, as kind of like an iceberg. Next slide. Yeah, and here's a kind of a way of visualizing that. So you've got all people who are infected as the base of the iceberg, then environmental surveillance data captures a portion, the detectable portion of that, and then these higher levels are, going through to who's picked up in diagnostic testing, who shows up at hospital, and then finally the death numbers. Next slide. So within the WHO guidance, the 3 things you'll find in there, the first one being the most critical that I'll focus on today, is really trying to say, well, when is it worthwhile doing this kind of surveillance? What additional added value does it provide to public health decision making? Secondly, what does it take to really plan and coordinate an effective program? And then thirdly, the section on methods. So what do we know about data collection, analysis, interpretation? I won't go into that so much today. Next slide. So in terms of these use cases, I've listed them all here. I think what's kind of fascinating about all of these is the way that environmental surveillance is useful tends to evolve in any given setting, depending on the status of the outbreak. So the main one we see is this detecting increasing and decreasing trends of the outbreak. So not necessarily equating it to numbers of people who are sick in the community, but trends of going up or down. It's been useful, particularly in countries that went for a zero COVID policy, sort of finding outbreaks in places that were thought to be COVID free. It's been especially useful in augmenting risk communications. So when people are perhaps a little bit uninclined to take up vaccination or testing, information about wastewater detections in the area can be quite motivating. It's also been good for cost-effective targeting of public health surveillance. So doing pop-up testing centres and things everywhere is not necessarily cost-effective, but if you can put those in the areas where the environmental surveillance data is showing higher cases, then that's quite cost-effective. There's particularly been implementation in areas, really sort of targeted areas like isolation centres, planes, transport vessels, gatherings, and so forth. And increasingly, as the pandemic progressed, we've seen more kind of detailed analysis on known variants and also looking for novel variants. Now I think we're all sort of somehow getting back to normal. I think what we're really seeing is less people showing up for testing, and the COVID environmental surveillance being kind of a useful gap filling where it's clear that the clinical testing may be picking up a far smaller number of what's really going on in the population. Next slide. So here's just a kind of a way to visualize all of this. The black line is an example of hospital admissions for COVID. And then the orange line you'll see is the environmental surveillance, and the use cases mapped onto that. So you'll see the early warning, behavior change techniques like encouraging the community to get tested and so forth. Next slide. Okay, so I don't think I need to tell any of you some of these limitations, but I think what's really clear is that where this environmental surveillance has been most successful has been areas of high sewage coverage. There have been adaptations to, especially for polio, in fact, adaptations to settings where there's low sewer coverage using sampling and open drains and so forth, but that needs to be scaled up and the methods need to be adapted for that. For COVID specifically, there's not enough experience yet to provide a standard protocol similar to what exists for polio and for typhoid, but I think that's kind of evolving quite fast and perhaps we could see that down the track. And finally, just to say, I think, you know, from some sectors, there's a perception that there's no ethical considerations because it's all anonymized data. I think that's true to some extent, but we do need to, especially for these highly targeted populations, consider ethical considerations associated with doing this. Next slide. Okay, yeah, I think some really key lessons I just wanted to draw your eye to is around data sharing and coordination. There's been lots of environmental surveillance that happened, but the data sharing and coordination was not necessarily well evolved enough to allow that data to be used for public health decision making. So right from the outset, there's a really nice checklist here to work with. We need to make sure that there's public health leadership and those coordination arrangements are clear. And of course, the capacity that's associated to run such a program. Next slide. So just a couple of points in terms of the outlook on this. I think what I see, at least in the public health space, is a huge upwelling of interest in environmental surveillance, particularly within the context of a really strengthened One Health approach, and especially for pandemic and zoonotic diseases. And we're seeing it, you know, this same community of practice is starting to mobilize now for monkeypox, but we don't want to be in a situation where we're scrambling for every kind of new pathogen. I think there is a movement now towards multi-pathogen surveillance techniques that's getting started, but has some way to go. So I think I've used my time. I will stop there and thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate, for this very interesting presentation. You made some great points, and I think, especially in regard to timekeeping, I would suggest that we could post the questions in the chat, and if we have a time at the end, then we have a larger question and answer session. But posing questions in the chat seems to work so far very well, so maybe we go with that. And I would immediately go to the next presentation, which will be shared by Tim Julian himself, as I understand. He will showcasing us the Swiss-wide monitoring of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater, being done in Switzerland. And Tim, he's a group leader of the pathogen and human health group in the environmental microbiology department at EAWAG, the Swiss Federal Institute of Aquatic Science and Technology. And together with colleagues at EPFL and ETH Zurich, he has contributed to building a consortium of stakeholders across Switzerland, invested in using wastewater-based epidemiology to inform SARS-CoV-2 disease dynamics, which led to the current nationwide surveillance program. Yes, take it away, Tim. You are still mute.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Natalie, and thanks for the invitation and the introduction and the opportunity to present to everybody. Can you see my slides okay? Perfect.
Yes.
It's also an honor to follow Kate, did an excellent presentation that sets the stage for what I want to talk about today, which is the Swiss-wide monitoring of SARS-CoV-2 in Switzerland. And of course, as Natalie mentioned, this is a large consortium of work that I'm presenting on behalf, including integration of stakeholders from the federal offices in Switzerland, as well as researchers throughout Switzerland. And what I want to highlight that Kate mentioned, which is that COVID-19 offered an unprecedented opportunity to highlight the utility of wastewater-based epidemiology for infectious diseases. And WB works really well for COVID-19 for a number of reasons. It's shed RNA is shed in very high levels in feces. There is a large susceptible population. So when a group of people are infected, sufficient people are infected such that it can be detected. And then it's also the most highly surveilled pathogen in history. And this is great for wastewater-based epidemiology. It's specifically because we can benchmark and demonstrate very clearly that WBE works for infectious diseases. And shown here are just some examples from Switzerland. There were almost 260,000 tests so almost 3 tests per person throughout the pandemic. And for GSAID, there were over 12 million sequences. So what we're doing in Switzerland in the context of research program started in February 2020 at the start of the pandemic, surveilling 9 wastewater treatment plants, Zurich and Lausanne as well. And then that slowly expanded into what we've been doing now for over a year, which is surveilling more than 1 million people, or 11% of the national population, at 6 sites shown here. And through this program, we've developed a number of indicators that Kate also talked about, specifically focused on tracking the temporal dynamics of the disease and trying to translate that into public health relevant indicators, specifically the reproduction numbers, the effective reproduction number. And then we've also been developing methods to track these variants, which is also an important part of SARS-CoV-2, as Kate mentioned. And so I just show some of our data from one of our 6 wastewater treatment plants, Werdholzli in Zurich, which treats 471,000 people's waste. And you can see here over time, the temporal trajectories of SARS-CoV-2 RNA track really well with the reported clinical cases. And I also wanted to highlight there's some areas of deviation. So with the introduction of Omicron, we saw a large divergence where wastewater signals underrepresented concentrations relative to clinical cases. And now in this summer, wastewater samples are showing elevated infections relative to clinical cases. And so this can reflect a couple of different things. It can reflect different shedding profiles of the variants, which is what we assume happened in January 2022, or it can reflect reductions in case testing, which is what we think is largely happening now. There isn't as much emphasis in Switzerland on testing. So the complementary between wastewater-based surveillance and clinics is an important thing to emphasize. The other thing we've been doing is trying to translate our wastewater data into public health relevant indicators, and one of those is the estimated reproduction number, which is the number of cases on average that each individual infection causes. And so as cases are above 1, it means the epidemic is growing, and if it's below 1, it means that the infectious numbers are decreasing. And we've been able to do this really well with wastewater. We show here that wastewater can track disease dynamics similarly to clinical cases. So as SARS-CoV-2 surveillance from a clinical perspective starts to ramp down, wastewater offers a unique opportunity to reduce or to monitor disease dynamics with reduced resources. And so this is a nice paper that we published in EHP, and I encourage you to look at to show the opportunities with wastewater. Finally, we can track mutations, and this is work done with Nico Berenwinkel using next generation sequencing. We can track the variants, the rise and fall in variants within the population through wastewater. We can also do this using digital PCR. And this was really important because this digital PCR-based data on variants within wastewater was one of the first pieces of information in Switzerland that showed us during the rise of Omicron and the rise of Delta, allowed us to estimate what was going to happen with the temporal trajectory of the disease. And also by monitoring these variants, not only can we track the rise of a new variant by an increase, but we can also track by a decrease. So this is SL452R allowed us to track the rise in BA1 through the fall of Delta. So by having indicators of BA45, when these indicators drop, we can see the introduction of a new mutation. So that brings me to the main point of the talk, which I'll go through really quickly, which is that Switzerland started a national monitoring program in February of 2022, covering 99 wastewater treatment plants. These are regionally representative and they cover 70% of the Swiss population. And so all of this information is available on their dashboard shown here. And interestingly, this wastewater-based data is integrated into the platform, the same platform that's used for monitoring the general pandemic. So it reports on testing results, it reports on clinical variants, the number of clinical cases, and it's all included in the same dashboard. And what they include, what the Federal Office of Public Health includes, is information on the relative viral load in each wastewater treatment plant relative to the historic peak starting with February. And so that's shown here. You can see Switzerland, the wastewater treatment catchment areas are color coded by the percent of the relative viral load currently. And then at each wastewater treatment plant, you can also see the temporal trajectory of the wastewater over the history since February. So it's a very nice dashboard. Another visualization that's included is the relative change. So you can see at each wastewater treatment plant whether the concentrations of SARS-CoV-2 are increasing or decreasing. And again, this is shown here with the overwhelming majority of the Swiss wastewater treatment plants either increasing or decreasing by less than 10%. So relative stability in the current trajectory of the disease in Switzerland. So that concludes the presentation. And now thinking about the outlook for wastewater-based epidemiology, I think there's a huge opportunity that Kate mentioned to expand this to other pathogens. And so an important aspect of this is how do we maintain momentum, particularly with SARS-CoV-2, but also generally for the wastewater-based epidemiology in the future. And that's one thing that we're focused on. Another thing that we need to do is start shifting towards sustainable programs. A lot of wastewater-based epidemiology has been in the context of research, shifting this to policy and monitoring platforms and within public health offices, within public health programs, I think is a very important next step for wastewater-based epidemiology. Thinking about things like how do you standardize programs? How do you standardize programs within a country, between countries, within a region, between regions? And how do you work with the various different stakeholders? And then another thing that Kate mentioned that's very important is how do we transition this to multiple pathogens? I think that's really important too. My personal perspective is wastewater-based epidemiology holds incredible promise in providing data, high resolution data, reliable, consistent data on diverse sets of pathogens. And there's a nice review here that shows multiple different pathogens that are present in wastewater, but we're continuing to learn a ton of information about this. So thanks a lot. I'll also be happy to take questions in the chat.
Thank you very much, Tim. Very interesting presentation, and I will definitely be taking a look at the data from your presentation later on, and also for your very important outlook points. Yes, to everyone, please post questions in the chat if you have them. I already see that some have been posted already. Moving right on, which is appropriately another case of wastewater surveillance done in the country, but we are moving a bit further south to South Africa, to be concrete. This will feature the wastewater monitoring done there, and the presentation will be handled by Dr. Said Rashida. She's a senior medical scientist researching SARS-CoV and wastewater at the Center for Vaccines and Immunology at the National Institute for Communicable Diseases in South Africa. She oversees the implementation and optimization of methodologies used to detect, quantify, and sequence SARS-CoV-2 from wastewater. She's interested in studying the evolutionary epidemiology of viruses through water and wastewater analyses. And she envisions a future where the health of the community can be accurately assessed through wastewater analysis. The floor is yours, Dr. Rachia.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Natalie, for the nice introduction. Yeah, it's really an honor to be sharing our experience from the South African experience on wastewater-based epidemiology. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has offered us like one of the best momentum to be able to implement wastewater-based epidemiology, and there couldn't be a better time for it. Okay. Next slide, please. Or should I be allowed to share my own presentation? Maybe it will be easier. It's not moving. Okay. No. Can you all see my presentation now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so first of all, I want to acknowledge my team members, which you can see on the far right, but also all of our funders and partners on this project. Now, this is just a brief outline of what I'm going to talk about this morning. First, I'll just give you a brief outline of a background of the project. Then I'll follow by the methodology that we used for the SARS surveillance project, then an overview of our dashboard, and then I will end up with the next steps that we're planning for the project. Now, the NICD is a WHO certified regional polio testing lab.
I don't see the presentation anymore.
It looks like she left. Maybe just give her a minute to try and reconnect.
This is bad for timekeeping.
Yes,
so, I apologize.
I know you had the best of intentions, Natalie.
Yeah.
I'm keeping. Was there next presentation? Maybe we can come after hers, or do we can come back to her presentation while she reconnects.
Yeah, that would be me.
Okay.
So,
all good. Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, let's see if we can move her in after. Yes. So briefly to me, I am Natalie Schmitz, the junior advisor in the sector program water policy at GIZ, and I wanted to give you a brief glimpse into what GIZ has been doing in regard to wastewater surveillance, and what we are thinking more on a global level, what the role of the wash sector is, and also especially what the role of SuSanA is in particular to that topic. Next slide, please. Yes, as you all probably very well know, is that we see that there are some issues and problems in different countries for oh, the slides have gone. Yeah, okay, they're back. For a functioning wastewater surveillance system, there's lack of capacity at different sector levels between different sectors, the lack of validated and harmonized procedures, what Kate has also mentioned. We have that the sampling of non-sewage system is a complication which we face in many countries, with 80% of the population not being attached to a sewer system. We also have difficulties in communication between the sectors, which in this case would be the wastewater sector and the health sector especially. And this also points to the problems we have in regard to financing and sustainable financing. So who's financing the monitoring in itself? Is it by the water utilities, by the wash sector, or is the financing done by the health sector? And yeah, how do we go over and continuously have that surveillance after maybe the first investment? So that leads me that there is an insufficient knowledge for an effective and implementable application of wastewater-based epidemiology in many countries, and thus there is needed to process experience and knowledge on approaches, the different procedures, coordination between the sectors, financing, and so on, to assess their potential applications in different countries, as well as the risk, which we heard also in regard to ethical considerations. Next slide, please. So what we've thought briefly here is that the role of the wash sector is, of course, to have a joint collaboration with the health sector and advise them in regard to the sampling procedure and ensuring the sampling quality, deciding if there's a sewage system where to take the samplings, how to cooperate with the water utilities regarding sampling tabling, and also on advising in regard to what are the sampling spots, especially if there's non-sewage systems, and how one can sample in that regard, and what does it mean then for the data in itself. There's also, with SuSanA, there is the potential for moderating a global sector exchange with peer-to-peer formats. And of course, there's always feedback welcome on how to deal with the 80% that are not connected to a sewage system, and what does that sampling then mean, be it for COVID or AMR and other pathogens, mean for the significance of the samples. And here we think this is a key question for all the SuSanA members to answer. And of course, there's always room for piloting measures in countries for best practice. Next slide, please. What we've been doing so far in 2 countries. The first one is Albania under the project, which is a larger project running since September 2016. It's the customer and performance-oriented drinking water and sanitation services. And with COVID-19's fund, there have been approximately 300,000 euro commissioned by BMZ in 2021 to establish an early warning system for SARS-CoV-2 and also other pathogens and AMR at the University of Tirana, which will promote knowledge transfers through cooperation with water supply and sanitation services and other stakeholders. The key results are that the micro and molecular biological laboratory for wastewater analysis has been established. The cooperation with the Ministry of Health and the Agricultural University of Tirana has been established, and there's cooperation between regional institutions. And so this is just touching it briefly, of course, that then the next steps are that there will be a national cross-sectoral crisis response teams for pandemic preparedness in line with national guidelines, that there will be further support for the university in fundraising and how they can finance their program sustainably, and also in the long run for a stronger integration of the national health sector in the EU and WHO activities and protocols. Next slide. And this is an old slide, I see. Right. It's an old slide, maybe I'll share it. Okay, hope you can see. Last point is the project in Jordan, which has been running under the decentralized integrated sludge management and capacity development in wastewater management. In Jordan, those 2 projects started in 2015 and 2017 separately, and they ended in 2020. And they are the has been funding for the Royal Scientific Society to investigate and prepare a technical report about testing of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater and sludge in selected wastewater treatment plants in Jordan. And further on, USAID has provided the virology laboratory of the Water Authority with equipment and materials. And future goals we would envision are that there would be a further implementation of a sensor-based wastewater monitoring and control system for pandemic prevention and AMR monitoring, and especially to strengthen the cooperation of the water sector with the health sector, have a sustainable finance of the wastewater monitoring system, and improve the wastewater monitoring for different uses with the water utilities in itself. But this is, future thoughts that we would like to see if possible. And that puts me to the end of my presentation. I will briefly, so
I can
maybe.
see, Dr. Rashida is back.
Okay.
Good, yeah.
So Dr. Rashida, if you're here with us, we just skipped briefly to my presentation, but if you are able, then maybe let's continue where we stopped.
Yeah, sorry about that. I actually did not even realize that the network went off. Because I think when the presentation went on, I actually couldn't see that I was completely offline, but yeah. Okay, let me share it again, and then I'll speak to it. Okay. Okay, let's see. Can you see my slide? Okay,
yes,
let me just put it on presenter mode. Okay, cool. Good morning again, and sorry about that. Actually went on to speak, but I saw that I was just speaking to myself. But anyway, first of all, I just want to acknowledge my team members that you can see on the right side of the slide, but also our funders and partners on this project. This is just an outline of what I plan to talk about. I'll just give you a brief background of the project, how we went from environmental surveillance of polio to SARS-CoV-2. Then I'll just outline our methodology, give you an overview of the dashboard, and what are our next steps for the project. Now, the NICD is a WHO certified regional polio testing lab, and we've been carrying out environmental surveillance of polio since 2017. Once the concept of the wastewater testing for SARS-CoV-2 was successfully established, we initiated SARS-CoV-2 environmental surveillance from the polio sites. Now, thanks to the funding from the Water Research Commission and the GIZ, we managed to collaborate successfully with other laboratories to expand that surveillance to major urban areas across South Africa. Now, throughout this project, we've managed to produce a number of outputs, but today I'm only going to focus on the dashboard. Now, methodology is straightforward, like any wastewater-based testing. We just collect the sewage sample. Now, between us and our laboratory partners, there is either passive sampling or grab sampling, which most of us are using. Then followed by concentrating the virus, extracting the nucleic acid, and then detecting the viral genetic material. Now, we do qualitative and quantitative based detection, but we also do genomic detection. Now, the data that is presented on the dashboard is based on the quantitative data. In terms of data management, the NICD and each laboratory is responsible for collecting sewage, testing, and reporting results to the NICD every week. We use the data to generate spreadsheets and graphs manually, which we then share with our key stakeholders that include the NICD focal lead on the incidents management team with the Department of Health, but also the Success Network, which is a network of laboratories and municipalities that came together for the SARS-CoV-2 wastewater-based surveillance project. Now, we also communicate the results to to the public weekly on the NICD website, but also on the dashboard, which I am going to give you an overview. When you first land on the website, this is what you see. This is the first view that you get. Now, to orientate you from the left to the right, you have two maps. The one on the left is going to present the districts, and the one on the right will give the location of the wastewater treatment plants that belong to that district. They are colored according to the levels of SARS-CoV-2, green meaning low levels of SARS-CoV-2, to red, which means higher levels of SARS-CoV-2. Now, the indicators you have above the maps from left to right are the epidemiological week and the date of the last update of the dashboard, followed by the number of clinical cases, which the default is the national, but it can change to fit the selected treatment plan. We also have arrows indicating whether the levels of SARS-CoV-2 are increasing or decreasing. Now, the white space you see, it's for the graphs that will show the levels of SARS-CoV-2 at a specific, in a specific area. And in order to obtain that, one first needs to select a specific district from the district drop-down list. And once you select that, you click Apply. On the example you see on your screen, we've chosen the Johannesburg area, for example. Now, once you click Apply, the map will reconfigure to show the area of interest, which here is Johannesburg. And you can see it's colored in green, which means that there are low levels of SARS-CoV-2 in the area right now. And on the right, the map on the right shows you the different treatment plants within the Johannesburg area, with the dots colored also according to the levels of SARS-CoV-2, green again, meaning low, and to right, which means high levels. Now, the graph on the right also populates with data from all the plants in the Johannesburg area. Now, each colored line indicates the fluctuations of the levels of SARS-CoV-2 at different plants, with the bars representing clinical cases of the chosen district. Now, once your graph has populated, one can go to the eye icon just above the graph, and which will give this infographic, which explains exactly how to interpret the graph. Now, let's say, for example, that you only want to have a specific, the data for a specific treatment plan within the Johannesburg area. One can go to the plant name drop-down list, select that plant, and click Apply. Once you do that, again, the graph on the right will populate with data only from the plant of interest. And one also obtains like a table just below the graphs, giving more details on the treatment plant selected. Now there is a little luggage above the graph that, if you click on it, will give you a description of what public health action should be taken, depending on whether the levels of SARS-CoV-2 in the wastewater are increasing or decreasing. Okay. So now that we have a functional dashboard, our next step is to understand how the public and policymakers are actually using the dashboard. Now, we also plan to develop a data input portal for the real-time uploading of data. And based on the feedback that we've received so far, we need to refine the portal to make the surveillance results easy to understand and more accessible. And last but not least, we're planning to add our genomic resource to the dashboard. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them in the chat. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Rashida. I'm so glad you could join us again for that excellent presentation. And the dashboard looks very interesting, and I will also be looking into that later on. So moving right onto our last closing input by Maria Luciana Ferreira. She's giving us a brief glimpse into the process of knowledge management and also, of course, the cooperation then for knowledge management between different sectors and stakeholders. And Maria Losada Ferreira is a scientific researcher at KWHR, Water Research Institute in the Netherlands. She's originally an environmental engineer from Portugal with a PhD on wastewater treatment obtained at the Delft University of Technology. At KWR, Maria works at the Water Treatment and Resource Recovery team and supports international activities through the Water Share Network, namely the ones related to sewage surveillance. So at last, the floor is yours, Maria.
Hello, very nice to be here for the first time, I think, for KWR. So I will start with a very brief introduction to what KWR is. I don't have my slides, but I can share them. So it's whatever you prefer, Natalie. Do you want me to share my screen?
We can see a screen, so don't you see it?
You can see my screen? You can see my slides?
We can see the slides for KWR, the ones you sent.
Oh, really? I don't see them in the presentation.
So maybe try it one more again. Now we don't see the screen.
Oh, here, now I see them.
Great.
Super. Okay, so KWR is a water research institute. Our shareholders are the water companies from the Netherlands and one water company from Belgium. Actually, what we do applied research. So we focus less on fundamental technology and we go more towards application in practice. So our scope of work is the water urban cycle, and that's why you have this little picture on your left. And that also means that we also have a part of our institute looking into the environmental part. In terms of research areas, we have different groups inside KWR. We are not very big, but we do have a certain pride of touching all these different themes inside the same institution. So we have a part looking into the societal changes. We have a part looking into sustainability. We have enabling technologies, and that's where I mainly work for. We have also the health group, very important into this discussion, and another group that is actually focusing on the future. So what do we need to do in order to become a sustainable and better and more equal society? In the part regarding to health, so we have different groups and different themes. We are focusing on emerging contaminants, on safe innovation in the water sector, on biological activity and microbiological activity. And KWR is also a HWO collaborating center. Whenever KWR wants to do any sort of international work, one of the ways that we have to do it is through our World Water Share Network. So it's a group of members scattered all worldwide that share common goals and have specific knowledge on specific themes that we like very much to share. So some of the members of SuSanA are also members of WaterShare. And that's why we saw synergies in the connection between these two networks and also on the specific knowledge sharing of KWR to actually bring it to SuSanA. So if you could go to the next slide. So KWR actually was and it still is very active on the part of wastewater surveillance. In the Netherlands, we usually call it sewage surveillance, but it's exactly the same thing. And we also do a lot of work related with antibiotic-resistant microorganisms. When it comes to the part of sewage surveillance, it was very interesting to see all the discussions that you had here in the previous slides. So what happened in the Netherlands was that because KWR was already doing sewage surveillance, especially related with drug consumptions, and at the same time monitoring viruses in the wastewater and water network, it was very easy or very fast to kickstart the sewage surveillance in the Netherlands when the pandemic kicked in. So actually, around February, March, KWR was already measuring SARS-CoV viruses in 5 wastewater treatment plants of the network, so the 5 biggest cities. And we kept going with that monitoring for a couple of months. At a certain moment in time, that data was shared with the health authorities of the Netherlands. The health authorities were already favorable to implementing this sort of strategy. So actually, in a couple of months, RIVM, so the Health Water Institution, the health government branch in the Netherlands, kicked in its own wastewater surveillance program. And they are currently doing it in all all the wastewater treatment plants of the Netherlands. Actually, I'm not sure if it's currently. They did it for a number of years in all wastewater treatment plants, and now I think they are downscaling. So I think now they are on the step of going towards the ones that give them more data. So in the Netherlands, it was a pretty organic story. So we as a KWR institute or as a research institute kicked off with the methodology and with the measurement and a couple of plans. We saw connections, we saw usefulness, and at that moment in time, the health authorities picked it up and continue the work and are still doing it today. So it was a bit of an organic procedure. Well, as a consequence, we are also very keen on sharing our knowledge because that's one of our main goals. If you go back a little bit, Natalie, we published at a very recent phase the methodology that we were applying in order to collect samples, to treatment, to show them. The work is actually it's actually still ongoing with projects that we have together with private partners. That's usually how we do it. But because most of our projects have a share of governmental money or public money, the publications are also available for you. So if you actually log into the library of KWR, you are able to check the reports that we have been producing on the themes, and with a very fast procedure, you are able to get the reports that we have been publishing for our partners and for our government in the last years. The same thing happens with the projects related with antibiotic-resistant microorganisms. You can also find them on the site. And sometimes not all documents are available because depends on the institutions that are actually financing, but most of the times you have all the reports available for you. So it's a good source of information if you want to know more about what happened in the Netherlands, what is still happening in the Netherlands regarding sewage surveillance and antibiotic-resistant microorganisms. If you go to the next slide.
Maria, so we already was overstepping the time bounds, so I would ask you to wrap it up quickly.
Yeah, I will be super fast.
Good. Thank you.
So we are now, as you understood from our talk, there were synergies between KWR, Watershare, SuSanA that we wanted to make stronger. So one of the actions that we decided to do together was, for instance, co-organizing events like the one that we did at the World Water Forum in Dakar, related with sessions where you would have the sewage surveillance discussed for scientific groups, but also for WASH communities. That was one of the example of the type of actions that we are planning to do together, that we actually did this one together and we would like to repeat. And now if you go for the last slide. the way that we want to do this knowledge management together is actually to do it on a very structured way. So we will keep an eye on the production of material at KWR that can be of interest to SuSanA. SuSanA will do the same. We will, of course, share the relevant knowledge in the SuSanA forum related with these themes that we just addressed, or maybe others that you find interesting. And of course, every time that there is some sort of an initiative that we can do it together, we will, besides organize it, also highlight it with posts in our two networks. Of course, these are all the things that we are going to do, but if you see the possibility of actually connecting these two networks of groups, you can always send me an email or ask me information about what's going on in KWR. That was it.
Thank you very much, Maria, for giving us this glimpse about the knowledge management and sharing the news of the cooperation between KWR Watershed and SuSanA. If you have any further questions to Maria and also to the other speakers, of course, post them in the chat. Once again, thank you to everyone who presented in this session. It was very interesting, and to not further anger the timekeeping gods, I will hand it back to Serene. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Nathalie, and thank you all to the presenters for really debunking certain myths, showing us what is actually being done by the scientific community, and really congratulations for the amazing work and contributing towards keeping us safe. So we will do a hard stop at around 1:15 and try and be back at 2. So I'd like now to invite Nitya Jacob, the coordinator of the SuSanA India chapter, to give us an update on what's happening in the chapter and introducing us to various FSM decision support tools. I know he will be supported by Dorothee from IAWAG. Nitya, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes, and I suppose if you both manage the time well, probably could have 10 minutes for a Q&A, otherwise it'll go into the chat box. Over to you, Nitya.
Thank you, and great to be here. Very exciting meeting. I'll quickly run over the SuSanA India chapter. It's one of the regional chapters, actually a national chapter, which was started way back in 2016 as the first of the regional chapters of SuSanA. It was promoted by the India Sanitation Coalition, which is a network of private sector, NGOs, the government, kind of an organizations in Delhi. And it was supported by a donor in India called Arghyam. Since then, it's been supported by multiple organizations. There's a consortium of 6 organizations at the moment that are supporting the India chapter. It's been fairly vibrant over the last 6 years with thematic discussions, webinars, and in-person meetings. We've had 20 thematic discussions. There's been a synthesis document from each of them, and there have been policy notes written specifically for different partners to use in their work with the government at the central level and at the state level as well. We've also collaborated with IRC and Water for People and WaterAid on research projects to research and document the progress of WASH in different states of India. The topics covered have been rural and urban sanitation, institutions, governance, technology, finance, and behavior change. And we try to build these around government policies and programs so that we can actually inform people and also get voices from the grassroots and feed them into the policy process here. There have been 12 webinars and 5 in-person meetings, and I was listening very intently to the previous session. One of the big discussions we had year before last in 2020 after the first round of COVID was on wastewater-based epidemiology, and there was a very interesting discussion and a policy note after that. The chapter at the moment has about 4,000 members from India, but also a lot from outside India. We've had, actually this would be part of the next of my next presentation, I think, after Dorothy speaks about the FSM decision tree. So, Dorothy, over to you.
I did it. Can you hear me? I can't see you. I guess you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, me again. Thanks a lot. I tried to speed up a little bit. I just wanted to share and update you on some selected tools from SuSanA Partners for actually an informed sanitation system and technology choice. So we at SuSanA, we engage a lot and work a lot around CWISE, and CWISE, citywide inclusive sanitation, for those that don't know it, it brings a couple of challenges for sanitation system and technology selection. So one being how to select locally appropriate technologies for very different settings. One is to consider entire sanitation systems. Another challenge is to plan actually from the beginning for resource recovery, and also to plan with all stakeholders. So selecting locally appropriate sanitation technologies requires to consider some preconditions like existing structure, topography, environment, and so on. It also requires knowledge on technology requirements, so how much water is available and how much is needed, and so on. And it also considers or requires to consider different preferences. So what is more important and given more important priority to. One example would be a trade-off between resource recovery and costs, or a given technology and its costs. So sanitation planning challenge 2 would be to plan for the entire sanitation system. So with the SDGs, it's not only about providing toilet infrastructure, but the aim is to improve sanitation facilities that are designed to hygienically separate excreta from human contact along the entire sanitation value chain, from the point of the toilet to collection, transport, and treatment. So SuSanA has, with others, of course, kind of tried to systematize this entire value chain from the user interface to the collection, convenience, treatment, use, and disposal. And one tool I quickly want to present you, many of you know it, but it's still maybe there's some people that don't know it. It's the Compendium of Sanitation System and Technologies, and it has shown a lot of interest and has proven a very valuable resource and decision support tool in many different contexts. And it's a very compact and easily accessible compilation of different technology options. So it includes both description of different sanitation system templates being one type of system configuration along the entire chain. And then it also includes fact sheets of different technologies that allow one to understand quickly on 2 pages what this technology is about and what are the main design or selection considerations. So the compendium has been translated in more than 10 languages, and it has also been contextualized. For instance, the last new version that we just published, and that is going to be launched later on as well, is the Compendium of Sanitation Technologies in Emergencies in Arabic. So this Compendium of Sanitation Technologies in Emergencies has the advantage that it is not only a PDF, but that it's also online. So having something on a web page, of course, allows to have a much more interactive usage of it and provide more kind of tools, interactive tools for informed technology selection. So this online version has a filter that allows you actually to interactively filter for certain technologies in a given context. The problem a little bit is still that when you really want to go into detailed feasibility planning and you have a set of different technologies, let's say you have like 3 technologies which are appropriate for each functional group, you would already end up in like 3,000 possible configurations of all these technologies. And it's not straightforward how to arrive from technologies to systems. So one tool that could help to overcome that is really to boil down the problem and go to a detailed problem. detailed program. And one tool I wanted to showcase here, and I think it's not so well known, but I'm happy that Nitya was very inspired by it. It's the FSM decision tree. It has been developed by colleagues of mine and probably other partners as well. I have not been involved. I'm presenting here on the behalf of them. And it is actually a paper-based, not simple, kind of sophisticated decision tree. So it's based on an elimination approach that emphasizes the importance of the assessment of the initial situation, the financial, organizational, and O&M realities in the field, and of the characteristics of the treatment sites and the demand for end products. And then it allows kind of in a second step to select a limited set of technologies according to qualitative technical decision factors. And then the selected options would need to be checked in order to make sure they fit to available skills, financial and organizational realities. And this is meant kind of as a template for a generic decision trees, but of course it has always to be contextualized to a specific institutional or enabling environment. And I think Nitya is going to present one example afterwards. I need to speed up a little bit. So these approaches, I think, are good. The compendium is good, but it's not enough. So you don't have a step-by-step guide how to get from appropriate technologies to systems, and how to actually systematically know which technologies are the most appropriate for a given case. And there is no kind of guidance how to deal with these trade-offs I mentioned. So why are these trade-offs important? Now it becomes a little bit technical. So if you want to talk about appropriateness, you really have to look at the entire system. So this is a very simple example, which I hope you grasp. Let's imagine a sanitation system with 3 technologies. So you have one which is a little bit moderate appropriate. Oh, sorry. One that is also moderate appropriate, and then a third one which is high appropriate and highly appropriate, and you have a second system with low appropriateness, high appropriateness, and again high appropriateness. So which one should you choose? So this is definitely something as a practitioner in the field you kind of are overwhelmed to kind of decide. And but the thing is that when you I don't know if you use the emergency sanitation filter. I did. And if you only focus on very much appropriate technologies, you never will find a system, because obviously you have to deal with these trade-offs. So it's important to look at these entire systems to kind of consider these trade-offs from the different technology options, the different criteria, and then the local preferences. So that's somehow something that we wanted to answer with a new tool, which is called SuNiJoice. So SuNiJoice is also online. It's really based on these previous examples, and it includes recent technology innovations, an advanced filter, system builder. It also allows to calculate resource recovery and losses, and the dashboard to discuss these results actually with stakeholders. So it contains mainly 3 different chapters. So one is about technologies, one is about different system templates, which again helps you to narrow down your selection, kind of dry, wet, with urine separation, without, and to compare systems. So it includes also this in the technology you have now about 87 technologies. So it becomes a little bit overwhelming, but we wanted to include not only the compendium technologies, but also others from other compendia that had evolved in the past. So it includes this advanced filter that allows you then to show kind of in your list of technology if a given technology is appropriate or not by the level of the colored bar you can see here. Currently, we have 27 kind of criteria and the data for all the technologies to select from all different kind of domains. And then it allows you to kind of compare or generate entire system and then compare different systems regarding different criteria. So, for instance, resource recovery or local appropriateness, considering 2 criteria, electricity supply in the case and the water supply in the case. So this resource recovery was on top of the last slide, because yeah, it's the sanitation planning challenge, which I mentioned in the beginning, number 3. And the number 4, which I mentioned, is this planning with stakeholders. So for Sunny Joys, we try to kind of develop, based on clues, a guide that allows you to use this a little bit slightly more complex tool than the compendium, to use this integrated in a planning approach. So how do you set up workshops? How do you define which criteria is relevant, and how afterwards do you explain the results to your decision makers or stakeholders? So this planning guide is currently being tested in Nepal, and we will incorporate the findings from this testing phase until the end of the year. So where we are now, we have this beta version. It's actually online and you can use it, but it's still a beta version. And we had done several user feedback interviews, which showed a lot of things we still have to improve. And it definitely also showed that while it's somehow intuitive and it's open source and everyone can use it, it definitely requires kind of this more guidance. So we included also some videos that explain what you actually do with it. Yes, thanks. That's it.
Thank you, Dorothy. Nitya, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dorothy. So I think when we started off with the process of developing a rural FSM decision tree in India about 7-8 months ago, we didn't know that EAWAG is also working on something like this. And I think putting the two together, we'll have a nice combination, a rather detailed matrix for people who are actually implementing FSM solutions in rural India, or in rural areas rather. So our mandate was to kind of see what's already out there in terms of fecal sludge management and how people are working on rural fecal sludge management in India, looking at the kind of social, financial, technical, and behavior change aspects. And unfortunately, the Swachh Bharat mission, which governs rural sanitation, the guidelines were extremely sketchy about how to decide and plan and implement anything on rural sanitation. And we brought that out. We brought it to the table, and then we said that, look, a lot of the WASH organizations here, UNICEF, WaterAid, Water for People, IRC, and the India Sanitation Coalition said that, look, we are working in the field, but we're not very sure how to explain to people to make choices about fecal sludge management. It seems to be heading towards a situation where you'll have fecal sludge treatment plants everywhere, and there'll be no rationale for their size, for their location, how they're going to be connected to their to the sources of sewage or septage. So we said, okay, let's look at different options and let's see what the guidelines say about sources of funding and how organizations have actually leveraged different sources of funds, the kind of technologies, and what is the kind of behavior change that's required, and then the capacities needed at the level of the local governments in India. What do they need to be able to make a decision? So how it works is that local government institutions are called panchayats. They're supposed to call in expert agencies who will help them to develop a detailed project report and then oversee its execution as well. They have a menu of financial options from various government sources, corporate social responsibility funds, donor funds, and their own funds. But each type of fund is meant for a specific activity. So we said that let's try and tie these things together, and then also try and convince people of the need for fecal sludge management, so that so that there's a demand for it, and they also demand quality services, and then they're willing to pay. So to bring all these together, we had a thematic discussion in February and March this year, and we looked at how local government institutions could actually take decisions about these. So the recommendations which came out of this all rural FSM solutions have to be contextual. And India is a diverse country. So what works in one area might not work in another area. So what works in a rocky area may not work in a sandy area or in a wet area, and so on. You need decentralized or on-site solutions because they're sparsely developed and remote, and households are scattered. So you may not be able to put in a sewage system. You might need truck transport or transport via rickshaws or some other means. A very strong recommendation was that a lot of households that have put in single pit toilets, they need to be encouraged to convert to double pits. And containment tanks that pass as septic tanks here should be converted to proper septic tanks by building baffles within them. This was the most desirable solution so that you're reducing the problem at source. The government guidelines suggest co-treatment of fecal sludge with existing FSTPs instead of setting up new ones, or with sewage treatment plants. So transport the septage from a cluster of villages to a sewage treatment plant or the fecal sludge treatment plant. But there are only a few of these available across the country, so this would take a long time to materialize. The emptying charges and the frequency would need a proper survey, proper database to be able to fix. Unfortunately, all these are also very political decisions. So the recommendation was that financial and technical considerations should override political considerations. Fecal sludge management could be integrated with solid waste management in some cases, and could be planned and executed in many rural areas. The quality of effluents would need to be monitored by pollution control boards and local authorities to make sure that the FSTP is performed as expected. So putting all this together, we came up with a rather complicated fecal sludge decision tree. It's kind of divided into technical aspects, which is on the left-hand side, the orange and the dark blue boxes. The ones in the middle look at FSTPs. So the orange and the dark blue look at on-site treatment. Two types, either you convert pit toilets to single pit to double pit, or you use trenching, and then you kind of use that for fecal sludge treatment. In the middle is a set of options for fecal sludge treatment plants. And it's a kind of a thing, if this, then you do this, and you do this, and you do this. And the idea is eventually you get to a product which could be marketed, which is safe enough for extraction and marketing, or for local reuse. The red boxes on the top right deal with behavior change communication. So you need to initiate a behavior change campaign to make sure that people are aware of the need and the importance of fecal sludge, and that they're willing to pay for it. And this is absolutely essential. Unfortunately, a lot of the work that's happening here tends to become very infrastructure driven, and the kind of softer aspects get neglected, like behavior change is considered to be a soft activity, and that gets neglected simply because that's the way the sanitation sector is structured. The light blue boxes on the right are to do with the sources of funds and recommendations on how different sources of funds can be leveraged and brought together to make sure that there's enough for setting up a fecal sludge treatment plant as well as running it. And I apologize, there are lots of acronyms in there, which are peculiarly Indian. There's the Finance Commission, which is FC. There is a Rural Livelihoods Program, which is MGNREGA. And then there's a Skills Development Program, NRLM. Yeah, I think those were the kind of peculiarly Indian things. So yeah, I think the idea was that if you are working in a local government and you're tasked with managing fecal sludge in your village, how are you going to go about it? So this was a kind of guide or step-by-step kind of thing that we wanted to put out there. We are working to refine it, and I think we've got lots of inputs even after putting it out on the discussion forum and from others here. So I guess we'll have a version 2. And I think with what Dorothy spoke about, it'll help to kind of make a more comprehensive guidebook for how to manage fecal sludge in rural areas. There are a few links. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is the link to the discussion on SuSanA. So the decision tree is also there, as well as the synthesis document and the responses to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitya and Dorothee, for that overview. And of course, on all things FSM, which we know is gaining quite a bit of momentum, at least on the continent, whereby the Africa Water Week is usually linked to FSM and really an area that is picking up. Dorothee, thanks for the insight on the Seaweeds program. I know there are a lot of questions usually regarding that particular program, so this has been really great. Thank you, Nitya, and thank you, Dorothee. So Alexandra is asking, please share all your presentations. There are a lot of demands for the presentations to be uploaded. So please do go ahead and share on the same. All right, I will give you a brief overview on the newest kid on the block, which is the SuSanA Africa chapter. Alexandra, let me try and if somebody can, Yuzhao, if you could kindly upload the presentation. Sorry, just having a bit of a challenge here. All right, while we wait for the presentation. Okay, so the SuSanA Africa chapter was actually started in 2020, actually in the middle of the pandemic. And it was supported by the WSSEC, AMCAO, and a number of other partners. But the reason for the rationale behind it, of course, was that the continent did require a similar platform that we were seeing in India, MENA, and in the Latin American constituencies. But also this had to do more with the softer side. I think Nitya did mention something about the soft side of things, which was really in terms of giving visibility to African voices, to African stories, to African experiences, and African knowledge, bringing it at the global level. But the second most important focus as well of the SuSanA Africa chapter was a gender one in particular, women and girls. We know that women and girls are often underrepresented and bear the burden of all things that go wrong in the wash sector. And this was really in terms of looking at the different faces, the challenges, but also the hopes. And this is what the chapter had focused on for quite a bit. So that was the rationale of the SuSanA Africa chapter. So a number of activities were undertaken. First of all, of course, the setup of the governance of the chapter, where we were having, board advisory committees, a continental committee where we had AMCAO, we have WaterAid, we have KEWASNet, TAWASANet, UWASNet, Speak Up Africa, a number of organizations that serve to steer a bit the chapter. And key activities were some of the stepping stone sessions where we really introduced the SuSanA Africa chapter across the globe. And I know a lot of you had attended that particular session. And that kicked off, first of all, with the African Sanitation Policy Guidelines. So this is an endeavor, an initiative that has been led by the member states on the continent in terms of providing a format of or what would be the best practices or what would look like the best policy when it came to the issues of sanitation. And I really encourage you to take a look at it. It's an extraordinary piece of work. It was consultative. It took over 2 years, a year and a half to 2 years to complete, but really brings all these various elements, the software as well as the hardware, the stories and the science brought together. So we went ahead and with the support of AMCAO and disseminated that quite widely across the board. We also had, in terms of some of the stories that we were collecting a bit from the continent, and One of them really was the discussions that were going around the very controversial but very real issue of sextortion in the water sector, whereby women and girls and vulnerable people are forced to exchange sex for water. So this is something that has gone quite far, and something that we used the SuSanA Africa chapter to raise awareness on some of these issues, or the violence generally that is meted out on women when it comes to all things wash. And we also had the other side, which was really looking for and bringing together women that are in the sector, that are managing directors of water utilities, scientists, practitioners, really to share their experiences and their challenges when it comes to the wash sector. So as I mentioned, it was two sides. Now, moving forward, yes, there's been quite a bit of a lull, happy to admit it, but also linked to the issues of resources. So this is something as well that we've been working on actively. And moving forward, we are going to be using the platform in preparation for the UN 2023 in March next year in New York, by mobilizing different civil society organizations within the various working groups. That's number one. Number two, the various call for actions. And this is work that we've been doing with SWA, the work that we've been doing with the butterfly effect. So really using the chapter in terms of, again, ensuring that the Southern voices are heard and ensuring that the Southern voices contribute to the wider discussion. It was basically our way of making sure that we had a seat at the table. So that is, in a nutshell, the SuSanA Africa chapter. I'd like to acknowledge, though she's not here, she's gone off to Ghana for a meeting with AFWA. I'd like to acknowledge Chaiwe Sanderson, who's the co-coordinator. I would also like to acknowledge our chair, Mr. Atta Benson, who is with us today, and some of our members as well that are here present. I saw it on the slide. The other important aspect is going to be that the SuSanA Africa chapter will be linked towards the hub of hubs. Now, this is something that is being led by AMCA, which seeks to really centralize this information as part of their drive in knowledge management, where we have, of course, WASMO, that has been talked about. So trying to see how we can further integrate, as well as the development of one joint newsletter for the continent. So this is really some of the exciting activities that we'd be coming up with. We urge you to join us as members and to support us moving forward. And we really hope that we can bring a lot of our knowledge as well, but also cross-learning and sharing. I've heard a lot today that could be of great use to the different members and to the continent, to our policies and our practices. So thank you very much. And that was the SuSanA Africa chapter in brief. I'm available for any further questions. So we did promise that we were going to have a hard stop. Again, any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. So it is 10 past 1. Let's try and be back at 1:45, if possible, or 10 to. The recording will be off, but feel free to go ahead and chat, exchange numbers, exchange contacts. After all, this is a large networking platform. Now, for those that will not be joining us this afternoon, that's unfortunate. We will miss you, but please do answer a short survey of 1 minute to help us improve the upcoming SuSanA meeting. You can scan the QR code with your phone or click on the link in the chat. Alexandra has put the feedback survey. Don't worry, Alexandra, about the presentation. Please go ahead and join us. And bon appétit. have a good break, and we really hope to see you in the afternoon. We have an exciting lineup. I think we'll be able to let our hair down a little later on, but we have excellent presentations. We still have the issues of gender, of climate change adaptation. We have a game, the Reclaim game, that is going to be presented to us by the Latin American constituency. So please, we're looking forward to seeing you. Have a good rest, and see you back here in 45 to 50 minutes. Over. Alexandra, is there anything you'd like to add before
No,
we...
just a big thank you to you and the great moderation.
Thank you to all of you. See you later.